Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another epic episode of Hero Paranormal Podcast, broadcasting just south of the old Sherman Ranch in the Uintah Basin of Utah from Space Wolf Research Base Camp. My name is Ryan, anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, bringing you an epic episode today. And if you haven't checked out all of our extra content on Patreon and Podbean, please do. There is a ton of content behind a paywall. Just give us a little support and it's all yours for about the price of a coffee at your favorite coffee shop. So definitely head on over to Patreon, look for Hero Paranormal and subscribe, or go to heroparanormal.com and support the podcast. On today's episode, we are blessed to have Assistant State Director of Utah's Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, Mr. Brian Lindley. Not only is Brian well-versed in all things UFO related, he is also an artist who does everything from fine art to painting some of the coolest motorcycles around. You can see his artwork at brianlindleyart.com. That's BrianLindleyart.com. Brian is not only a UFO researcher, he has volunteered his efforts to the Utah Mutual UFO Network, making the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity his mission. He has selflessly joined the world's oldest and largest volunteer investigative body into the UFO phenomenon to answer the age-old question of, are we alone in the universe? Brian is also a Utahn, so he's very familiar with the unique attributes of the state when it comes to high strangeness, and of course UFOs. He is recently returning from a trip to Utah's famous Uintah Basin in a search for answers and much more. Brian, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Hey Ryan, thanks for that awesome intro. Yeah, that was great.
Man, I'm so excited to talk to you. I know that you just are coming back from the Uintah Basin. Where should we kick this off at? This isn't your first trip up there, is it?
No, I've been up there, I'd say about 4 or 5 trips. First one was just kind of casual, and we had some experiences on that trip that kind of just kept us coming back there.
I have to know more. How did that one go?
So, with the now world-famous Skinwalker Ranch, like anyone else, our trip kind of started off with, just kind of poking around the area, and with a very respectful trip to the gates. I must say that first and foremost. You always got to be respectful with the private property and the people who are working in the area and with everything they've done. So I want to start with, telling people, it's a great area, but first off, keep it respectful. These are private properties and private owners. But anyway, so, we kind of start off with just, the photo op to the gate. It was our first time out there, and we just kind of had the day to kill. So it's such a beautiful area. We decided to do some photography around the area. So, we kind of drove around to some other areas around there, and there's this really cool old service road. There used to be some old houses down there, but long abandoned. So me and my wife just kind of pulled the car over and decided to walk around, take some photographs. And while we were just kind of, walking through some of these areas and down this road, I was keeping an eye on my wife, and all of a sudden, a man just appeared out of nowhere walking down this road and kind of started following her and kind of threw me off. So I went to go catch up with her and, see who this gentleman was. She kind of passed out of my view. And when I caught up with her, I said, hey, what did that guy say to you? And she responded, what guy? There was nobody there. So that really tripped us out. And while we were kind of hanging out in this area, we actually started hearing these weird voices coming from, I couldn't even tell which direction or whether it was coming from above or below. Yeah, just kind of heard two people talking, and we're looking around and there's nobody there. And with you being familiar with the area, you know, it's pretty much open farmlands. There's nowhere to hide. So we're looking around, and kind of like almost all of a sudden, as soon as we acknowledged it, these voices kind of just disappeared. Almost like a vacuum, just sucked the noise out. But that left us kind of weirded out. So, yeah, we got out of there and still trying to figure out what we saw, years later.
Man, that is so unusual. Interesting, because that whole area surrounding Bottle Hollow Reservoir, I would say for about 80 miles and sometimes more, depending on how the bird flies, there just seems to be a very simple and complex reality of high strangeness where, it's hard to explain. There's much more than explanation. A lot of academic sources have referred to the area as anomalous, and it's been studied, as you mentioned, by a lot of people, including the property that you went and checked out. And that figure, it's not like it was hidden behind a rock or anything. Did it seem odd to you in the way it moved, or was she aware? Did she feel like anything was watching her? That just seems so typical, but yet strange.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So yeah, when I finally caught up with her, she was very nervous. She felt uncomfortable, which she's a Spitfire. She never feels uncomfortable anywhere. She was one who was running out into these places, and I was like, hold up, She got way ahead of me, and I was just kind of checking out some of the cool terrain. But so what freaked me out about it the most is, like I said, this was an old road, and on each side there was a ranch property, and each property was fully, barbed wired fences. There was no access to either property. So that's what confused me the most, is if this guy appeared where he did, he would have had to been hidden, jump a barbed wire fence, follow her down a path without her knowing, and this was mid-July, so it was crunchy leaves, dry grass, you could hear every step. So for this person to be, I'd judge about, 20 yards behind her.
Whoa.
And without her even hearing or seeing him, and to this day she still doesn't believe me. But I could tell you, I could even describe his clothing, his demeanor, everything. It was, I thought nothing of it. I was just like, oh, there's, I'm going to go see what this gentleman has to say. Maybe he wants us to leave the area. I don't know. So I go down there with that intention, and there's nobody there.
Man, that is freaky. And it reminds me of so many stories I've heard in the area. One in particular was Dave Rosenfeld, the founder of the Utah UFO Hunters, was going up just south of their 9 Mile Canyon. And it was in the winter, and he saw, for lack of a better word, just someone walking along the side of the road, and they were not very well clothed for that time of year and had a flannel shirt on, and they passed him, and then they figured, maybe we should turn around and go back. And when they turned around, he was gone. And, this stuff happens. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, no, that's a great story, especially coming from Dave, because being out there and talking to people who've had lots of experiences in that area, I'm always, mine's kind of weird and it doesn't really fit in any box. So I'm always asking people, have you heard voices, or have you seen people that have kind of come and gone? Because it was a very natural situation, and then it wasn't,
Mm-hmm. And you're in a pretty unique position because of your connection to MUFON. You're getting some of the hottest reports, I'm sure, on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. What have you come across anything that has stood out to you or indicated that, there may be more to this UFO mystery than a lot of people are aware?
Yes, and kind of like even my own experience, with me working with MUFON, of course, every time I'm out looking for things like everyone else in my field, I'm always looking up. and little did I know everything's happening around me. I'm busy looking at the sky when I don't realize that everything around me is changing, and that was, with that being in my opinion, one of the world's biggest hotspots for that kind of activity, I definitely believe that there's more to it. With MUFON, we definitely are focused on, the scientific study of UFOs and what we see in the sky, but there are always other strangeness and things happening around that as well. So that's kind of undeniable, really.
Yeah, and there's been something I've noticed recently is there has been. I'm really glad that Starlink has provided a tracker when it's kind of like an app that shows people when you can and can't see Starlink from particular areas, because Starlink has sort of become the catch-all. Oh, it must have been Starlink. I've seen that so many cases, when people see things and they say, oh, it must be Starlink. And the internal workings of that are so precise that now they have that app where you can go and check and see if it's visible from that part of the planet at that particular time. And the activity charts are super helpful. Have you heard anything about any sightings that seem to be like Starlink? I know there was one in Vernal not too long ago, but it was not Starlink, at least according to the activity charts. Have there been any of those down in your neck of the woods near Salt Lake? And you're in Syracuse, aren't you?
Yeah, I live up north, but I also work a lot in Salt Lake, so I'm kind of all over the place.
Okay.
But in answer to your question, yeah, there definitely is some reports where you really just want to put it in the Starlink box. But when it comes down to the way the witnesses describe the movements, even the color of lights or how they're spaced, there's a lot of things that kind of will lead me to say it's not a Starlink. But with Starlink, you'd imagine how many reports we get where people just aren't aware of what Starlink is or what they're seeing. As a matter of fact, I saw my first Starlink just a few months ago camping, and it was funny. We were sitting around a campfire, and my son looks up and says, Dad, aliens. So it's pretty funny, and we look up, and, it's quite a sight to see. So someone who doesn't realize it's Starlink is definitely going to, their eyes are going to bug out of their head, not know what they're seeing. But yeah, we get so many cases of those where we actually have had to create kind of a streamlined process for investigators to, because we put in a lot of detail into these reports, and even if it's just something that's identifiable, it still takes time for us. So we've had to kind of create a streamlined process for ones that we are sure are Starlink. But yeah, ones that even may appear to be Starlink, we can't just always rule that out right off the bat. We still have to do our work and make sure that we're not just dismissing people so quickly. Yeah.
And kind of going along the Starlink path and Elon Musk, it reminds me, there was, this is an older case, 1984 in Roosevelt, Utah, that was documented by Junior Hicks. And I just came across this case. It's one that I've seen before, and it just freaked me out the other day because I was looking at the drawings and stuff that Junior Hicks gathered from the witnesses. And I won't say their names, but one of them was Elon. I won't say his last name. And it was 1984. They saw their TV making a static sound. They went to turn off the TV and turn it back on because sometimes it would, clear up. The technology wasn't like it is today. And sparks emitted and into his hand, turning his arm numb. And then they saw, for lack of a better word, these beings in robes that seemed to be able to witness them. And they moved towards the screen and took up the screen, and they had kind of snake-lit eyes. And anyway, it's one of those strange cases that came out of the Uintah Basin that, they were younger, these two that were watching TV. It was about 1 a.m, but they could see these figures talking to each other and seemingly kind of talking about them. And anyway, there's more to the case, but back to the basin, I guess it's kind of strange that and then they saw what was described as a craft, a triangular shaped 30-foot in diameter craft with blue lights on the bottom and a greenish color. Now, with MUFON, you guys get these kinds of reports all the time, you know, where people run outside the house, they see an object moving away from the top of the house, and at the same time, they're trying to kind of analyze what they saw. Do you have any advice for people? Because I know that MUFON has a lot of programs and educates people on how to kind of be in the moment and remember what it is they're seeing and document it, so that if people do see this stuff, how they can document it so they don't forget right away or just forget it altogether.
Well, the first thing I would say is, you know, which luckily people nowadays, and with everything that's going on, everyone's more willing to come forward and share their stories. So that's number one, is just speaking out, and yeah, the sooner the better for sure. And MUFON also has many other resources with people who have had experiences, whether it's abductions or missing time. Like lately, over the last few years, MUFON's actually hired a lot of people to come on that have a lot more expertise on that kind of stuff than I do, with experiencers and pretty much anything that you can throw out there with your, you know, experience, no matter how weird it seems. They've brought on a lot of good professionals to kind of help people with some of these very traumatic experiences even. So we have different levels of investigators, and, you know, that way we make sure we're getting people to the right place and that have knowledge of what their experience was.
And, you know, it's strange because seeing all of these reports on a regular basis like you do, it's hard to do without thinking that there exists, at least on some level, alongside our own existence or tangible world, that there seems to be another that seems to be interacting on every level with our existence, kind of a duality. You know, a lot of people call it the phenomenon. But then again, it seems like it's super capable of like masterful deception and being able to take on different forms. Have you, and it's kind of going into the shape-shifting a little bit, or the shapeshifter phenomenon, what's commonly known as skinwalkers. But have you had any cases come through where you could attribute it to something along the lines of a shapeshifter?
That's kind of harder for me to speak on personally. As far as like shapeshifters, like I say, when there's a more of a very close encounter, we have a experiencer resource team that we kind of forward onto that kind of deal more with those kind of close encounter level 5 cases. So I haven't dealt with a lot of those myself, but we do have a team that's capable and ready to kind of take those reports and deal with those. Because like I said, we don't want our, you know, standard investigators really diving into stuff that, you know, takes a higher level of people that have, you know, most of the people that work in MUFON in our experiencer resource team, they have personal experiences themselves. Mm-hmm. So they are open for those, and I think ready to take on those kind of reports and, you know, get a better account of what actually happened to these people and what they're dealing with. But as far as shapeshifters, you know, MUFON is more focused on, you know, our motto is, you know, the scientific study of UFOs for, you know, the benefit of mankind. So I think they try and focus more on what they can collect than the actual accounts, you know.
Absolutely.
But we do get all sorts of different cases and people ready to, you know, to do the correct interview with that. So,
and, you know, given the classified nature too, you don't want people to be worried about telling you stuff and then you mentioning it out to the world on a consistent basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, people's confidentiality is always a top priority as well. So
for sure.
We try and share stories where we can to, you know, educate people, and because that's important as well.
And I find it's interesting that, at least in the Uintah Basin, we've dealt with a lot of groundbreaking and extremely informative research that's come out, which is kind of legitimizing research in general to the topic. And you recently came back from a conference that was well, it's described as sort of a surface level way to interact with a lot of the people that are targeting this type of research.
Absolutely.
How did that go? What authors or scientists or researchers did you get a chance to interact with or find anything out about?
That was the Phenomicon conference, and I guess it was in its second year. I went last year as well. And what was so cool about that is it kind of brings all the different layers of this and all the different genres of, the paranormal together. They had speakers on ghost hunting. You had, James Kinnan and many others. They're talking about the cool stuff in the Uintah Basin and the old, the treasure hunting lore and all that cool, Aztec gold, all that fun stuff. And you also had the Bigfoot community there, as well as the UFO community was there as well. So it was such a cool experience to see everyone from all those different, genres of the paranormal come together, because often, you'd think everyone would get along, but there's always been kind of some, rifts between some of those different communities. So to see them all to come together was awesome. And everyone was so much fun. Everyone was so nice. And, even the cast of Skinwalker Ranch was there, Expedition Bigfoot, and they didn't just speak. They made themselves accessible all weekend to interact with the public. I mean, I must have had a dozen conversations with all the, with Eric Baird and Travis Taylor on their current research going on at the ranch, and then authors like April Slaughter was there. She's also a medium. I went on a ghost hunt with her that was really eye-opening.
She's great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's fantastic. She did such a good ghost tour. It was her, and she was teamed up with Cypress Paranormal Research, and they were fantastic. They gave us all the equipment. We did a ghost hunt of the Vernal Hotel there for about 2 hours, lots of EVP sessions. So, yeah, it was quite an exciting experience. We were there for all 4 days. So I just got back a couple days ago. I'm still tired.
And that kind of leads me into my next question, which is like, you got a glimpse behind some of the curtains to this research, and something that has been highly documented, at least in the paranormal or supernatural world, and also by the Defense Intelligence Agency, which has been contracted to through some experts, and the OSAP and ATIP program, which concentrated a lot in the Uintah Basin, was something documented that they call the hitchhiker effect, which before was sort of unnamed, but it's a phenomena that strange things tend to happen to people after they visit areas of high strangeness. Have you had anything since you've gotten back? I know it's fairly recent, but have you had anything that seems a little out of place, or just kind of like a little paranormal tap on the shoulder since you got back?
Actually, funny you asked that. It was kind of funny. When I was at the ghost tour, I was excited. I was suited up, had a bunch of equipment. I was ready to go, waiting for something crazy to happen. And I didn't really have a very personal experience, minus some really cool EVPs. But it was kind of funny. We were back at the conference the next morning, and I was actually at April's booth, kind of talking about the ghost hunt from the night before, and something actually grabbed my leg. And I thought it was my wife just messing with me, and I turned around and nobody was there. Oh. So, I mean, I kind of sat there in silence for a few seconds, like, no, come on. I'm in a building of 1,000 people here, and now something happens. It was, so I actually asked April about it. I said, hey, this just happened. And she's like, yeah, I've actually had something kind of hanging around my booth for the last couple of days. So that was definitely not the hitchhiker effect I was expecting, but it was definitely some strangeness there.
Yeah, man, you've got to be vigilant. You never know. That is so interesting. When the phenomenon.
Like I said, it's never when you're expecting it. That's for sure.
Playing around in front of that many people. Messing with your mind, because especially in a scenario like that, that's going to bewilder anybody.
Yeah. Like I said, it's when it comes to these kind of things, it's never when you want it to happen. It's
And
so to the point where you almost question your own sanity, you know?
oh, for sure. Yes. And that happens a lot in the basin. And that's kind of, the tangible world, when you interact with something that seems to be just beyond the veil, it seems like it has some kind of a dualistic nature. It can interact with humans apparently whenever it wants and is capable of masterful deception, as you've mentioned here. I mean, able to kind of manipulate human consciousness just to a point where it baffles whoever it's interacting with. And a lot of times it's investigators. While you were up there, kind of just to switch gears a little bit, did you find any intriguing reports in the presentations, or did you happen to see anything in the skies?
Not this time around. And of course, since it was a conference, we were inside for most of the time. So normally when I go up there, I like to spend a lot more time doing personal, research and investigations and even just hiking around. I mean, that area is just gorgeous and there's so much to see and do. And I was really hoping to make it back to McConkey Ranch, but we just didn't have time. But as far as like anything like that, not so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was definitely no shortage of stories going around. So in every table I sat at, waiting for speakers to come on, everybody had a story up there. And honestly, that's kind of what I think gets us all down this path is we all have an experience we don't understand, and some people shrug it off, and others of us, decide to get more involved and do more research and, kind of go down that path.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's how I got started with MUFON is, from my own UFO sighting just right above my house. But as far as me seeing anything in the sky in Vernal, not so much, but.
Now I have to know, what did you see above your house? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I knew I was going to jump back and forth there. Knew you wouldn't let me get away from that one, but. But, so this was a few years ago, and we were just getting ready for a camping trip, kind of loading stuff out to our trailer. And, I just look up in the sky right above my house, and there's just this big, bright orb just kind of there. I looked at it, and, I'm also kind of skeptical in nature. I'm just like, okay, it's a weather balloon. It's this big sphere in the sky. It's a weather balloon. So I go back inside the house, load up more stuff, come out about 20 minutes later, and it's still there. It was actually kind of windy that day. And then I kind of took notice, and I watched it for a while. And then I also kind of picked a point on my roof, a point of reference, so I can be like, all right, I stood in a certain spot. I picked the corner of my roof, and I said, all right, now I know if it moves or not. I'm going to kind of get a reference with this tree. Watched it for another 15 minutes, nothing. I mean, it was so still. It was just so eerie how anything in the sky could stay that still, regardless of whether it's a drone, balloon, or this or that. So I kind of went in and got my family at that point and said, hey, come check this out. We brought out the binoculars. We got a better look at it, through that, and it was kind of lit up and just kind of this ball of light. And even after about, I'd say we've been watching it about 30 minutes at this point, we live up next to Hill Air Force Base. All of a sudden, the F-35s from the base, they had definitely noticed it. So they started making passes on it.
Mm.
And I'd say after about 3 or 4 passes on this thing, it was still there and it just kept moving. And at which point my wife said, we've got to go. Like, we've got a camping trip. I'd love to stay here and watch this all day. So we finally just left and it never moved. I mean, I really wanted, I wanted to stay there all day and see if I could see it come or go or leave or make any sort of movement so I could, make a better projection as to what we were looking at. But after that, I kind of hopped online and started, just doing my research online. And apparently there was a ton of activity in that area. Around the same time, there was posts on Utah UFO hunters.
Mm-hmm.
There was even, and this is even before I joined MUFON, I found some MUFON cases all within the same month where there was just these white orbs all over the place in northern Utah. It was kind of a little UFO flap there for about a solid month. So even after doing that research, that actually kind of is what, doing my own personal research of what I saw, that's what kind of got me. I was poking around MUFON's page, and I said, you know what, I actually would like to research this more. And that's when I decided to sign up to become an investigator.
Man, that's great. That is so cool.
So that was kind of my sighting and kind of my history of why I decided to, get involved.
And you mentioned something super interesting for listeners that haven't been there, which is McConkey Ranch. And it has some very interesting petroglyphs that are unique to anywhere else in the world. I mean, there are others in Utah that are fascinating, such as the Guardians at Sago Canyon, which is south of the ranch. And, both of these panels are very complex. I mean, archaeologists have called them barrier-style anthropomorphs, and academic experts have referred to them as ceremonial or ritualistic. But no one's been able to indicate or even have a clue as far as their actual meaning. And I think it's interesting because that's kind of where you've got to picture yourself coming across these canyons back in the day and seeing these panels. It would be obvious that this would, epitomize evil, or at least a warning of some sort to guard the entries, or, warn passersby that they should proceed with caution. And, it's strange that these areas are areas of high strangeness. And now in more modern times, we have the government, this is wild, but kind of going along the same lines. We have the government who is starting to disclose things where in the past they've really sort of hidden things. The United States government has a long history of hiding the truth, and now it seems to be telling the truth, which is great. Have you noticed that at all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think we can all, be on the same page that they clearly know more than what they're saying, but no, it's a great movement, and just, with them finally admitting that these things are real. I mean, of course, anything they do know is going to be buried in so many private programs that will probably never see the light of day. But but no, it's undeniable, and with all the military videos that have come forward, and now the public asking their elected representatives to get involved and say something, it's amazing to see these new programs and bills that they're actually passing, making it easier for people to come forward and being so open about it. And I watched all those briefings, and sorry, jumping around a little bit more. The one part of that briefing that I found so fascinating is, they come out talking about how this is everything we know and we're totally transparent and all this. But the second someone mentioned USO or, submerged object, they immediately said, that's for the classified meeting. That was the one thing I think they gave away that meeting, where they were like, okay, they know a lot more about the submerged aspect of it, which those videos have been coming out of these being trans-medium objects that are, even from all those other Nimitz and other encounters, those were coming and going from the water. So I'm very interested to see what comes out on that, because I think that's the one part they're still holding back of, because we can all make guesses to what's flying around the sky. No one can guess what's going that fast underwater.
Man, that is such a good point, Brian, because the narrative is avoiding this. It's a massive project that they're holding all the data on. And, I know for a fact that many people in the San Diego area are seeing things going in and out of the water at rapid speed, all around the all around the coast there, even by Coronado, which is a military base. And strangely, getting back to the basin recently, to give listeners a little background, the property I own up in the basin that's a base camp known as Space Wolf Research, I sold a portion of that property to a friend of mine and somebody I met through Jeremy Corbell. He's a researcher doing consciousness technology studies up there. And he's named it Umbra Viventus Lucis. I believe he was also there at Phenomicon. And he's camping out at the property and has a pond on his portion of the property. And he last night called me and said, "This is very strange, but there seems to be machinations or mechanical sounds coming out of the pond. It's gurgling, it's bubbling. Is there any kind of machinery that you're aware of, Ryan, like a pump or anything in this body of water?" And there is none. There's zero machinery there. And I think that this USO phenomena is like one of the technical, great, and yet disturbing, interesting facts that's it's being held super secretive by the government investigations. And before I sold this portion of the property to this gentleman, I had cameras all around this pond, and we did, in fact, catch things going in and out of the pond, kind of stylistically, like it was a place to hide. It sounds super, super strange, reflecting the fact that water and something flying are interacting. But I think that's a super obvious connection that it's hard for people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about UFOs for however many years. Now all of a sudden you're saying, wait, they're underwater now? It's kind of, it's kind of hard for people to make that jump, without even thinking about it, because you've been hearing about flying things, but the second you say water, they're like, what? Why? Why would they be underwater? I'm like, well, why would they not? If they're a transmedium object, then, space, water, even the Earth itself, there's been plenty of reports of these things flying right into the side of the mountain. So just kind of just disappearing through it like it's nothing really.
It's so wild. I recently, I cannot find it for the life of me. I'm looking now, but I recently heard something along the lines of, I believe it was the Air Force was monitoring an area near the Mariana Trench, which it's thousands of feet deep. And it is somewhere where things were seen going in and out and around some of these, warships. And that's what's so scary is we're talking about leading edge technology with, FLIR systems that are armed and it functions as just the epitome of our war machines. And it seems as if, at least from all reports, that the United States Department of Defense is concerned because there are things interacting with these ships in strange manners. Like they have strange mannerisms. Their speed underwater can't be explained. Have you had any USO type reports coming out of Utah? Because I have heard a lot of the amber lights there by the Great Salt Lake, but I haven't heard of any going into the water. Have you heard anything like that, Brian?
None that I'm aware of up here, and I do know which ones you're talking about. Those amber lights by the Great Salt Lake. Mm-hmm. There was even a really good one kind of by the Salt Lake just last year, kind of the same thing. But as far as in Utah, I haven't heard any of those. I haven't heard any of those reports. But MUFON does have one expert on actually submerged objects, and that's. I don't want to butcher it because that's just kind of so far out of my scope of work, but even MUFON has looked into that. And I know there have been cases.
Yeah, the USO thing is huge. There's been historical reports there at Bottle Hollow Reservoir of people seeing craft going in and out of there as well.
Well, and even just last year, again, I don't want to butcher any story or give people any wrong information, but I believe it was just last year. One of our submarines collided with something, and they never found out what it was. It wasn't the bottom, and It was in the South China Sea, and they don't believe there was any other military of ours or anyone else's. And the story just kind of stopped there. There was an actual collision with one of our submarines that they were never able to explain, or at least that they told the public.
It's so crazy because, I mean, we know that the technologies of a lot of these machines, especially when you're talking warfare, are way up there. And when they seem to be at their infancy in comparison with some of these, submerged objects flying at thousands of miles an hour, I mean, it reminds me a lot of the Calvin Parker case. And I mean, that was years ago.
I'm not sure I'm remembering the Calvin Parker case.
That was out of Pascagoula, Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. And I've talked to Calvin, and it's a very similar situation in that they were out near this body of water in Pascagoula, and they saw these bioluminescent craft, for lack of a better word. And they, in fact, did cruise around underwater. And, this was, our technology, as I said. I don't want to in any way minimize the extent of our technology, but at the same time, it's like this was in the 70s, and for something to be that impressive, technologically advanced at that time period, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around. I don't want to minimize what our government can do. But it just brings me back to kind of like the more recent stuff where, in my opinion, the government is being somewhat transparent. Maybe not completely, but they're being somewhat transparent, which we cannot turn a blind eye to, in that they're actually asserting that something is there.
Yeah, no, and that's a huge step. I know some people, they want it all. They want, they're expecting the government to just wheel out the, UFO from Roswell. But, hey, we got people talking about it, and it's on display now. And to have our lawmakers acknowledging it's a real thing. But now what they actually have to do is fund some of these programs. We had some speakers this weekend talking about, yeah, they have a UAP task force, but, the parts of the government that actually pay for it have yet to cut any checks. So... So I don't know if hopefully they're, making big steps to making a priority and not just talking about it to, appease the people who have seen these videos. So, but either way, it is a huge step for everyone in the right direction, not just ufologists, but our national security and really the people who deserve to know.
Yeah, and I've been speaking with a guy who's extremely busy, but he's involved with an aerospace corporation that's trying to get funding to do some tests, and we're still awaiting. It's difficult. It's kind of a tough, situation because he has the lineup of people. He's got the properties lined up or the private property lined up here to analyze it. But again, when it comes to the funding, you have to kind of you kind of have to be careful because there are usually NDAs that have to be signed. You can't you can't speak about absolutely everything, and it as a point of reference, it's difficult because I think of much of the research we're discussing with other properties in the basin. And they have to be held to kind of some of the same residual stuff when you're actively researching something and you have government money or funding involved, which kind of brings me to Luis Elizondo. I know he's gotten a really hard time, as you mentioned. A lot of the people involved in ufology give anybody that comes forward a lot of criticism, and they question his credibility. What are your thoughts of Luis Elizondo?
My hat's off to him. For someone to come forward and lay it all out with risk of destroying his life, which they've made several attempts to. good for him, and good for the pilots that have started to come forward, especially all the military people. All these people have signed all these non-disclosures where, they could lose their pensions.
Mm-hmm.
You could be retired from the military and come forward. They can take your pension away. You're not out yet. You're not out until you die. They still have ways of punishing people who come forward. So no, good on him, and what he's done, is absolutely amazing. I think it's incredible, and I think he actually started a lot of these fires, which is what is bringing people forward. Not just military, but tech people. Those are the people we need to feel comfortable to come forward. Now, I know there is a piece of legislation. Again, I'm not going to try and name it or this or that because I'll just butcher it. But I know there is a piece of legislation right now being kicked around Congress that is basically protecting people who do come forward and who have signed non-disclosures, to where I think once a certain contract is expired, you can come forward without repercussions. Clearly some stuff, if you're active in the military and you come forward with a bunch of secrets, you're going to get in trouble. But some of these older, military folks who have incredible stories dating back, 50, 60 years, those kind of people need to be protected to be able to come with those stories. And, so I think that piece of legislation, again, I'm not sure which one it was, but I know they're working on something right now that would make it much easier for people to come forward.
Hey guys, I usually don't pitch anything, but if you are interested in having a killer tan now that fall is coming and winter is on the way, look no further than Spice Bronzer. We got a warehouse full of these, and they're awesome. They come in different shades, and it's all organic. It's the only product with all organic ingredients to get a cancer-free tan. You just rub it on, kick back, let the all-natural product do its thing. Just message us at Hero Paranormal at yahoo.com, and we'll set you up with a $20 tube of the best bronzer you'll ever use. You can check the product out on Facebook at Spice-Natural Bronze. That's SPYCE-Natural Bronze. Tan like your life depends on it. I think that's so cool because, I think Mr. Elizondo's in a tough spot. That DD Form 2836 is a very serious agreement. And people always look at him sideways when he takes a moment to gather himself before answering a question. But that's got to be tough to navigate, especially having been involved with an obscure Pentagon program, at least at the time. And it kind of brings me back to, all of the naysayers. We now have a branch of the government known as Space Force, and everybody's first inclination was to make fun of it. And to me, it's like, this is cool, this is great. Any progress that we're making is good progress. I'm with you on that. And with Luis Elizondo, I had the opportunity of meeting him, and he seemed like a nice enough guy to me. And as he has had, for lack of a better word, or is fearful for attempts possibly on his life. I know he's been seen with bulletproof vests from time to time. And oh wow, that is a really big helicopter flying over me. I'm usually pretty quiet here. But yeah, coming back to Hill Air Force Base and a lot of the cool projects coming out of there. I know we got a new fleet of the warplanes out there. Have you had a chance to see any of those in your neck of the woods?
Oh yeah, I am right in their flight path.
Oh man,
and we love it. My wife was she's ex-Navy, so she actually worked on a lot of those planes and jets. She worked out on one of the aircraft carriers on the USS Lincoln for many years, working on these jets. So we love it when they buzz our house. We're always kind of checking out the new gear, and but yeah, they kind of take off from Hill Air Force Base, and they kind of do a big loop and to land, and we're kind of on the western side of that loop. So, yeah, we get to see all their cool stuff, especially around the air show.
That is
During
so
the air
cool.
show, yeah, they're flying in formation and doing all sorts of cool stuff. But
yeah, I have a buddy that lives out by Colorado Springs, and he was telling me about them and how cool they look. They seem to outpace the old ones, bar none. But
oh yeah.
the other really cool thing about Utah is we have so much national security, much like Hill Air Force Base. We have the NSA Listening Center. We have a lot of space warfighting stuff going on. And we, of course, have Dugway. Have you heard anything interesting or interesting sightings out in that area?
Absolutely. Actually, I would say most of my best cases, all in the state of Utah, have all been in the general vicinity of Dugway. Yeah, I had one recently. I mean, again, protect people's identities, and I won't get into too much of the details, but we had a government worker who was out. I mean, this one was just a few weeks ago, who was working out at Dugway, and he was just parked on the side of the road, and he had a sighting that was pretty remarkable. It was just a bright light that actually ended up splitting into four, and he kind of, and the way he described it, it's almost like one bright light, and then as it turned, it was actually four lights, but then once it turned, he described a needle-like craft that had four bright lights on it. You could actually see, it wasn't just lights, you could actually see kind of a structure to it. And he said he watched it for about a minute or so, and as it headed towards this really thin, wispy cloud that he described, it could not hide these lights. He said it actually went into it and disappeared, almost like it was going through some sort of doorway.
Whoa.
And I mean, it was an amazing account, and he, unfortunately he didn't get any photos or anything of it, but this was a gentleman who was actually really upset about it. He didn't contact us going, "Oh, this is awesome, I saw a UFO, this is amazing, I have to tell someone." He reached out because he was genuinely upset. It kind of rattled his whole worldview. It was to the point where he didn't know what to do or who to talk to, so he kind of hopped online, found MUFON, and submitted a report. And I've actually talked to him a few times over the last couple of weeks just because he doesn't know who to talk to about something like that. But so that was one amazing encounter. And then I had one even last year where some, group of soldiers were out there just doing kind of routine nightly exercises, and same kind of report, just a bright light in the sky that was just almost blinding. They didn't give me any description of craft, and it wasn't like four or anything, but it was just a singular bright light that just lit them up, and he said it was so bright that it even woke up the people that were asleep, that were resting on this exercise. And then when he called it in to his superiors, they said, "Don't move, stay there. We'll come out to you." And they came out to these people, and as far as he reported, they took their clothes, washed them down, and sent them on their way to go through, many more interviews.
Whoa.
So, if it was something, just a UFO or not a UFO, if it was something that was ours, why would they be scrubbing these people down for radiation or whatever they were exposed to? But so that was just another account. But I get a lot of.
No worries, we're all good. And as we wrap up here, I want to kind of point out something that I find really interesting. That is that a lot of people that are involved or interested in UAPs and UFO research seem to have an artistic side. We have like the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. A lot of UFO researchers seem to be involved with musical arts as well as other arts. And you are also an artist. I wanted to get into, you have such a cool website. I wanted to kind of tell the listeners about your art. I'm also
Thank you.
blown away by the motorcycle stuff. Oh my gosh.
No, thanks. I appreciate that.
So yeah, I mean, I see the photos here. What got you involved with such cool art, and how did you integrate these into your life? This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been an artist, and started as a young age. But I've been airbrushing for about 20 or so years, and just by happenstance, when I first started doing that, I also met a gentleman who just opened up a motorcycle shop. The motorcycle shop was Cooney's Customs, and that's what I do most of my motorcycles out of, and that's where a lot of my work comes from. But yeah, I just kind of started painting bikes, and I'm sure they looked absolutely horrid. You all got to start somewhere. But yeah, I've been doing that for 20 years, and it's been awesome. Yeah, I get all sorts of cool opportunities to paint motorcycles, cars, even oddball projects, caskets, even.
I saw that.
Helmets,
that was awesome. I thought that was so awesome.
I've even done prosthetics for the University of Utah, so it's really opened me to a lot of very different aspects of places I would have never, gone if it wasn't for, that artistic, aspect of things. It really takes you in some interesting directions for sure.
Man, it is great. And let's tell listeners where they can check out your art. You have portraits, helmets, fine art, motorcycles. I mean, you name it. And where they can buy it or just check it out.
Yeah. It's just my website is brianlindleyart.com. It's Brian with an I. If you Google that, it should pop right up. But I have some fine art for sale on there. I used to do a lot of art gallery stuff. I have mostly focused on motorcycles over the last few years, but yeah, that's my website, and please check out my social media as well, brianlindleyart.com on Instagram. And yeah, that's where you can find me for my art stuff.
Man, I'm so happy you came on the podcast today, and so many thanks for helping with Utah's Mutual UFO Network and all things UFO related. And I know that the Uintah Basin holds a special place for you, and you continue to visit it. We'll have to touch base again. And yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks for coming on.
I'd like to thank you, and if I could even just thank some of the other groups in the area, Dave Rosenfeld and Utah UFO Hunters. They've kept this going long before I started doing it. So major props to those guys. And also, even with MUFON, we could always use more people here in Utah. So if anyone listening is actually interested in becoming an investigator, there's plenty of opportunities here in Utah. So if you think it's something for you, don't be afraid to reach out through the website and get in contact with us.
That's great. That is awesome. And they still offer training, correct? You can kind of level up.
Yeah, you can if you just want to have access to all of our cases, you can go on there and just become a member, and that gives you full access to pretty much everything we have. If you just want to even just see everything that's out there. So you don't have to become an investigator, but if that's something you do want to do, then you go through their training and you get the manual, and clearly there's some testing involved in making sure that you know what you're doing before you start, down this path. But yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and I'm so glad I did it. So
thank you so much, Brian, for taking some time out of your hectic day. I know you got a lot going on, and it's been an epic conversation. So much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. It's been a lot of fun, and keep up all the awesome work you're doing as well.
What a great guy. What a great conversation. Brian Lindley. Definitely check out brianlindleyart.com. It's BrianLindleyart.com. Brian is, again, not just a UFO researcher, not just the assistant state director of Utah's Mutual UFO Network. He selflessly is constantly investigating different reports. He's all too familiar with the unique attributes of the state of Utah and its hotspots. And he is a big fan of the Uintah Basin and goes back regularly. So glad we got to talk to him. For those who are listening, also don't forget to support Hero Paranormal. You can go to heroparanormal.com or find Hero Paranormal on Patreon and become a supporter to get much more content. Support the podcast, helps us make it happen. The more support, the more podcasts. It's valuable time out of everyone's day, and I really appreciate people like Brian coming on, and I love to be able to talk to these people. Also, check us out on YouTube. That's where you can get all of our free content, but there's a bunch more behind the paywall at Podbean and at Patreon. So look for Hero Paranormal there. Also support Hero Paranormal on Instagram. It's free to keep up with the new podcasts. Just like and subscribe to us on Instagram and we'll keep you updated. Same goes with other social media like Facebook. Look for Hero Paranormal and follow what we have going on. And don't forget to keep up with spacewolfresearch.com. That's our base camp in the Uintah Basin, where I basically just kind of have it as a science project. And I've been talking with some amazingly connected PhD scientists and experts with connections to the aerospace industry and theoretical astrophysics. We're getting into it. And whatever we find, we will do our best to figure out. So until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off.